I was always into drawing from quite a young age, and as a teen I wanted to do graphic design, street art, comics. I became quite an active graffiti painter in my teenage years, and as I progressed through college I eventually began to realise more specifically what I was interested in doing. By my second year at university, I'd had a lot of time to just make work inside a studio space, which is something I'd not had before at college. I went on a trip to London for the first time, and like a mission to see as much art as possible. And these big figurative paintings were really exciting me. I found myself quite submerged in my own little world of painting afterwards. I'd paint things like this picture of my living room. I'd paint totally abstract things and just random things that I might find anywhere, really. It's always made a lot of sense to me to paint pictures of like girlfriends and friends, people in my life. I was looking at Matisse quite a lot during this time, and the simplicity and positivity of his work really appealed to me. It was through Matisse's work that I began to really see what painting was all about for me, and I kind of discovered a lot of artists that in some ways follow in the footsteps of Matisse. It was great to have like this kind of material from life that I could work with to try and figure out how to paint. And I just painted loads and loads initially to just learn how to paint, really. I wasn't too precious about what I was making. I just kept making whatever I felt like doing and experimenting. I feel like the classic motifs of the still life and the reclining nude are kind of like these tools at my disposal to try and figure out my own language. Drawing from life more and more allowed me to process like raw visual information around me, and I tried to use existing works of art as a framework to start putting my own things together. So in 2014, after graduating, I moved all my stretcher bars and painting stuff over to the Two Queens Gallery and Studios in Leicester. I showed some work with the other artists there, and I really liked it, but I didn't stay too long. In 2015, I moved back to my hometown of Warsaw, and I moved back into my parents' house. And I was quite lucky to get this studio, actually. It's a bit of a dungeon, but kind of all I could get at the time. The same year, later that year, I moved into another space which was a lot better. It has like really nice skylights in the ceiling, which is quite important. Also in 2015 I was part of a show called Jurassic Paint, which is an entirely virtual show where the organisers photographed blank canvases and then edited my paintings onto the images. It's a project called newscenario.net. I've included an image here of a painting by Jonas Wood, and I went to see his work at Gagosian in 2015, and it really made a big impact on me. I came back from London after seeing Jonas Wood's show, and literally spent all of my money on acrylic paint, determined to replicate some of the things I'd learned from kind of looking at his work close up. And he uses many layers of acrylic to create these really flat planes of colour, which he then works on top of with oils and the thick oil paint on top of the thin coats of acrylic. Has a real impact. They seem to kind of like pop off the walls, and the scale and colour of these paintings was just mesmerising for me. Got really excited in that show. I kind of came back with a lot of energy. Up until this point, a lot of my paintings were painted with quite thin washes, and I had used blocks of colour, but there tended to be some shading, and I never really painted multiple layers of the same colour on top of one another to achieve a kind of stronger base layer. This is also a time where I became quite interested in portraying less positive things in my artwork, like the cityscape, which can be quite a positive and inspiring place, but can also be a very harsh and dangerous maze. Spent a lot of time in the city around this time, and also my dad was becoming very ill, so I was experiencing this stuff at home, and I was also working in a horrible job. I think this painting is really successful for me in terms of portraying something that was happening in my life, to me and around me, and I'm kind of this flayed figure in the centre, in this dreamlike hallucinated world that also looks a bit like a game level. And I can remember how mentally exhausted I was at this point, and I think you can almost see it in the painting. Other people have told me that they read it a bit differently, but yeah, the figure in the corner is from a painting by Gauguin. Here's another cityscape I did using this same kind of perspective drawing style. I really like how the lights of the city look at night time, and these were my first attempts at making images of this. This one took quite a long time to make, and it was difficult to render everything in a consistent sort of way. Using the spray paint did help, but I felt like I still wanted a bit more control. This image is a bit like doing a still life from an old PlayStation game. I wanted to try and transmute the sharp graphics of these old 90s games into painting. I thought the colours and textures and the characters were interesting. I'm interested in these sort of graphics that they had to be simplified to fit physically onto the discs and cartridges, which were obviously very limited back then. And you could argue that they're like very influenced by Cubism. They're quite groundbreaking and innovative, in my opinion, and they paved the way for a new type of seeing and imagining virtual space. This is the kind of language I grew up with, watching my brother play these games from a young age, and I've actually have even had dreams in this style of low polygon graphics. I found myself very inspired by virtual space and artificial three-dimensionality. I read a book called Art and Visual Perception by Rudolf Arnheim, and this book I think changed my drawing habits a bit. It influenced the way I was reading the work of other people. He talks in quite a scientific way about the mechanisms that animals use to interpret sensory information, and like the connections of the eyes to the brain and what's happening. But he elaborates on these things by talking about painting and drawing, and I think after reading this book I became a bit more aware of the devices I was using in my drawings, such as gradients and perspective. Being more aware of these things allowed me to experiment with them a bit more consciously and deliberately. So this is another cityscape. The figure is actually taken from a Cézanne painting. I just picked him up and dressed him, and I was trying to experiment with the portrayal of depth. And I think my use of spray paint had improved here. I like the strange kind of double perspective. Kind of references the game style reality as well as the concepts in that Arnheim book I was reading. A bit like mixing game imagery with art history and painting. So, this is an image of some of my work installed at Bonington Gallery in Nottingham, part of a group show called Terraformers by the group Mould Map, which it's like the name of a series of artist books and exhibitions organised by Leon Sadler and Hugh Frost. With these I was making studies of actual game screenshots and also trying to make drawings from my head that were like imagined game graphics. And they kind of fit into the framework of having a relatively simple 3D grid-like space with something happening inside it, either a character or shape inhabiting the space. I was invited back to Two Queens in Leicester in 2017, and it was my first time hanging any big canvases in a space to myself. The paintings were not all strictly related to one another, but I just wanted to show all my best work that I had at the time. And I wasn't really that focused on creating a continuous message or underpinning to everything. Also in 2017 I was asked by a French publisher if I'd like to put out a book of drawings, and they left it pretty open. I decided I wanted to attempt a sci-fi comic, which I think surprised them a bit and me, and this pushed my illustration skills quite hard. I ended up making quite descriptive drawings that felt a little bit less abstract and experimental to my normal drawings I was doing. And the lines were cleaner, and there was a kind of a narrative, but it was a very loose one. The next comic project I worked on was much more ambitious, and I did it in full colour, and I really wanted to experiment more with storytelling. And I found it quite challenging to draw comics, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed challenging myself like that. I never finished this project though. Looking back on it, I can kind of see that it was a bit of a way for me to bury myself in work and set myself like an unfinishable project to help me deal with the loss of my dad, who had died. Getting really into this project kind of helped me focus on something, and I think doing so much colour work in Photoshop, my skills with the drawing tablet and the digital painting generally just improved loads, and they seem to kind of become an essential part of my practice, like beyond the scope of this particular book project that I was working on. And since then I work digitally as well as on canvas, and they both seem quite natural ways of working to me. I make digital paintings that are just standalone pieces that aren't really meant to be in a book or anything like that, just like my paintings might be. And further to that, the marbled borders I was using for the comics, the frames around the images, kind of came over into my paintings, and I experimented with this liquid pouring medium called GAC for acrylic. And you can create these kind of effects similar to the paper marbling. And I like these borders because for me they seem to kind of frame the image in quite a psychedelic way, and looking like it's as if you're looking back into a memory or a dream or something. This one's called Lost in the Dunes of Doubt While Seeking an Oasis of Truth. This is a close-up of the GAC pouring medium. It's very expensive, and half of it kind of ended up on the floor. It looks really great, but I didn't go back to using this as often as I would have liked because it was quite expensive. This one is called "On This Planet I Can Do Anything I Want To," and it incorporates this geometric pattern in the background that has quite a harsh contrast to the liquid patterns on the border, and also makes it have a sort of, it gives it a kind of optical illusion effect, which in my opinion reinforces the mysticism I tried to create for the character. It's a kind of psychedelically coloured version of a figure stolen from an old painting of Neptune. I began to invent like narratives for some of my work, and like those last two that I'd named almost like a line from a poem. And I really like classicist artwork that illustrates kind of mystical themes, and I find this to be an area that I can have fun playing around with. This mask was the first of a series. This one is the Magma Eater, and in the series they all have these weird names. It's a kind of experiment with obscure narrative and mythology. So I've been staring at these heads at the gallery where I work, and it's Walsall Art Gallery, and we have the best collection of Jacob Epstein stuff in the world. It's like his family collection, and they've grown on me a lot, to be honest, after years of looking at them. This mask by Rodin is also in the collection, and I think would have belonged to Epstein himself at one point. So we had this big sculpture exhibition at the gallery, and so yeah, I found myself sitting amongst all this amazing sculpture, and I do tend to draw quite a lot at work when I'm sitting there. So I kind of just ended up drawing a lot of sculptural stuff, and that's kind of what pushed me into making some sculptures. I ended up showing some of these sculptures and masks and a few paintings at a kind of a luxury clothing store in Cardiff, but it didn't end very well because a lot of my work ended up getting damaged, and this sort of put me off using plaster to make sculptures, really. I'm sure there's better ways of using it than my techniques. It's something I'd like to revisit, really. This is another video game study from this time. I was trying to paint the pixels like individually, but I didn't really have the patience for it. And I really like the idea of trying to paint in like tiny marks like Monet or Seurat, but with more like a futuristic subject matter. So these were the first run of prints that I made. They're risograph. I wanted to be quite ambitious because I wanted to have a lot of good stuff to sell at the store in Cardiff, and also I was doing some book fairs and things. So I made like 5 different prints all in one go, and this one was the most successful. It's a digital painting, and I sold quite a few more of this particular print than the other ones. Which I'd say it did push me to maybe develop that style a bit more, and selling quite a few of them made me want to produce a few more pieces in a similar style to that one. And I like how these digital paintings look on screen. They don't necessarily have to become prints, I don't think. I do make a lot of paintings that are just sort of made digitally and viewed digitally, and I like the idea of having it existing virtually because it seems to fit the subject matter. I felt like there was room to include narratives with some of these like more illustration type work. I'd experimented with writing kind of obscure poems to fit the imagery. So these are a bit more recent. I'm quite a keen aquarium keeper and aquascaper, and I like to maintain a planted aquarium with fish and kind of trying to establish like a small balanced ecosystem, kind of like a little world that I'm the god of. And I suppose it's not dissimilar to making images and comics and paintings, really. Around 2019 I started spending a lot more time outside and also keeping fish, and I think this is what made me return to some more naturalistic subjects. So this one references Peter Doig's painting of his brother standing on the surface of a frozen lake called Blotter. Despite doing some more naturalistic subjects, I still continued doing the game paintings, and you can see here some of the source material I used to make these paintings. So yeah, throughout lockdown, I've coronavirus lockdown, I found myself spending a lot of time outside. I stopped riding public transport and would basically ride my bike every day to the studio. I think this could be a reason for returning to natural subjects a little bit. It's possible I just was becoming a little bit tired of doing the game screenshots, and I wanted to integrate some of that mark making and style of drawing I was using in the game paintings, and perhaps use it and go back to some older ideas and motifs, kind of revisit the plants and portrait style paintings, and instead of using found imagery, using things from my own life. I made these watercolours of this spot at the stream near my house, and I took them back to the studio to try and make a larger piece from them, along with photographs. And I actually found myself liking the sketches made on location more than the studio version. That was a big canvas. The big canvas felt a bit ingenuine. By chance I found this painter online called Christophe von Wey, and he's making work like this outside in the dark. And it kind of reminded me of something that Monet would do, or like an impressionist they're really into working directly from their subject. And except I found this much more kind of futuristic and industrial, and I found myself almost trying to use his language or his work as a way of reapproaching the subject of the cityscape. His focus on the lights as opposed to the geometric structures of buildings was really interesting, and it was in his work, it was as if the lights were the only things to suggest the depth in the darkness. I made these two in the studio from photographs that I didn't take myself. I found them online, and the fact that I didn't take the photograph myself bothered me a little bit. So I wanted to somehow work with a similar language to Christophe von Wey, but it's only recently that I've realised to do this I have to go out and try painting at night time, because making it up or working from someone else's photo just wasn't quite working for me. So I tried to combine the language of Christophe von Wey with the game style slightly, with drawings, and I made a lot of abstract drawings like this with a coloured background and a kind of city silhouette placed on top. This one is titled Modern Chameleon, and I think I had a lot of success with the kind of the oil paint on top of the blue figure. I feel like there's a kind of difference in the language used to describe the buildings in the background and the figure in focus in the centre. And then further afield, the far background is just like a haze, a bit like a Rothko painting. So I kind of found myself painting outside again. I'm currently finding a lot of interest in returning to more naturalistic subjects and working from real life. I've been using oils outside as well as watercolour, and it feels a bit ultra traditional to make work like this in the plein air, as they say, but I've got really no problem with having lots going on in my practice. I've been making observational work all throughout my time painting, and it's always kind of informed the work that I make up from other sources or from my head. Yeah, this year I started oil painting outside for the first time ever, really, and I find it really challenging but rewarding. And I'm quite interested in it because it's changing how I'm working a bit, and I find myself discovering different mark making, and like painting with different marks, really, which is it's interesting to change the way you do that, I think. These are plein air paintings again, but at night time, um, and they feel like quite a nice blend of what was otherwise seemingly different areas of my work. So, like the game landscapes and more natural imagery are now able to somewhat come together in these, and I'm quite interested to see where this takes me. I'm looking to bring some more plein air painting into like painting outside from observation, and then bringing it into the studio, and then trying to scale things up, or even taking a big canvas outside and painting that from observation. That would be quite interesting, but logistically it's not that easy to achieve. Yeah, so this is just something I thought I'd show at the end, because it's something I've kind of got in the pipeline. I've been working on some like standalone digital pieces to offer as NFT sales, and I'm quite interested in this technology and where it's heading. I'm yet to do it at the moment because there are costs involved with making NFTs, but I do think it's something to look into, and it's potentially like a whole new market for fine art, and like a bit of a revolution, really. I think anyone who makes digital artwork that is viewed like exclusively online or on a screen, any of these artists are going to be excited about NFTs, I think. So yeah, something to look into.